All right, I think it's time to begin. This panel discussion has come at the end of a pan-TIFR event associated with the International Women's Day. Last year, we as a community viewed Picture a Scientist, and we had a panel discussion after that. And this year, we watched a film on the mathematical vision of Maryam Mirzakhani, the first woman fields medalist. And we had about close to 350 people who have watched this film across the various centers and the main campus of TIFR, either virtually or in person. And I would say here that if anybody in this group or anybody outside this group, but you know of, still wants to see this film, please let me know. I'm Sandhya Kaushika on the TIFR main campus, and we can arrange a viewing. The International Women's Day celebrates women in general, and in a scientific institution, of course, the mission being science, it's women in science. Women are a large underrepresented minority. They're about 50% of the population, but often less than 10% of the faculty, especially in premier research institutions. I think we can all widely recognize that talent is broadly distributed, but opportunity sadly is not. And also it's time to acknowledge that women are one large underrepresented minority, but particularly in India, there are others as well. There are other barriers to entry and progress of class, language, caste, disability, etc. And one of our panelists today will touch upon disability as a barrier and how you can sort of think about this in our working environments. As one of the major research institutions in India, TIFR should ideally be at the vanguard of recognizing and addressing these issues within its academic spaces. Young researchers and researchers in training can, should, and increasingly do expect their training and working spaces to be enabling to achieving their research goals. As anyone who saw the film would have noted, Mirzakhani had supportive mentors as well as peers early in her career and very close collaborators. And it is one of the themes that this will be touched upon by this panel. I will hand over this panel to Sujata Ramdure, who is going to be the moderator and who needs no introduction to several of you today. Sujata is a very well-known, accomplished mathematician at the faculty of the University of British Columbia in Canada. She did a PhD with a very young child at TIFR and was faculty in the Colaba campus before heading to this position. And the panel itself, who she will introduce, has researchers at several post-PhD stages who expect better from all of the institutions that they are part of. And Sujata also has a very nice anecdote about how Mirzakhani long ago visited India, which she may share with you during this time. So over to you, Sujata.
Thank you, Sandhya, and hello to everybody on the panel. Nice to virtually see a few known names on the panel. And please forgive me for not switching on the video because it's 4 a.m. here and I just woke up. And also I don't want to be distracted by degrading voice quality, which usually happens. I mean, it's unpredictable, but it can happen. And that sort of distracts me. So I would like to keep it this way. And thanks for organizing this event. And it brings back memories about TIFR. And I wish such events were regular at that time as well. My lasting memory of TIFR and of doing PhD there is bringing my young daughter to work when there was nobody at home to take care of her. And one of the things I would do, I can never forget this, and my daughter also, somehow it's seared in her memory. In the afternoon, if I had classes and if I had to go, then I would put her to sleep on my table and put all these bound. It was very convenient to have the TIFR library in the same building. And I would have all these bound volumes of journals, which I would bring and just keep them all around her so that she didn't fall down when I went to the lecture. And so for me, it was such a pleasing sight to later see the institution actually pay attention to having child caring spaces in the campus. And many of the younger faculty actually told me how much of a stress remover it was and how they felt relieved that they could just walk in and keep an eye on the child and so on and so forth. And let me introduce the panel. Okay, before that, I want to share this other anecdote about Mirza Khani. People probably don't know it, but there is a Women in Mathematics event, IWM, International Women in Mathematics event. It's called WM Squared, which is actually part of the ICM now. And it originated in India. It happened during the ICM 2010 in India when we held the first such event in Hyderabad. And Maria Mirza Khani, who was at that time, I think if I remember correctly, she was still doing a PhD. She was one of the invited speakers. And already at that time, I remember various people talking about her great work. And as organizers, we were all quite interested in having her over, and we were lucky that she came and she gave a talk. And of course, for us, it was quite interesting to see how she would evolve, being a woman from Iran. And at that time, Iran was still going through troubles with the turmoil in the Middle East and so on. Of course, she was in the US at that time in Stanford, not in Stanford, maybe in Harvard. And but still, she had come down and she gave a very nice talk. And then later on, when I was part of the other women events as part of the IWM, it was very sad to hear about her health issue. And in fact, one of the things that we pressed on IWM was very keen that we make this movie. And I don't really know if this was part of the plan, part of the movie that IWM had planned, or it was independent, but it's still very nice to see this have taken shape. And a couple of years back, we staged it in UBC here, where there's a cohort of Middle Eastern students. And many of the male students came to me after the screening and said, "Oh, thank you for organizing this. We would have never known this had we not seen it here, because it's unlikely we would have ever seen such a movie in Iran." So I thought that spoke volumes about the different ways in which barriers were erected internationally, even in this day and age of technology and so on. So with this brief introduction, I want to introduce my co-panelists. There's Tanvi Jain. She's currently working as an associate professor at ISI Delhi, and she joined ISI Delhi in 2012 as an assistant professor and was a faculty at the Department of Math at Delhi University for around 2 years. She was a recipient of SERB Women Excellence Award in 2013 and of INSA Medal for Young Scientists in 2015. And then there's Vaidehi Thatte, who did her BMath and MMath in ISI Bangalore, Kolkata. Vaidehi, I've had the good fortune to meet her personally. I haven't met Tanvi. I don't think I've met Tanvi. But Vaidehi I have met, and she did a PhD at the University of Chicago in 2016. She's currently working in the United Kingdom as a researcher, teacher, and mentor. And I would like to welcome Benky Krishnan, who's an associate professor, and he joined TIFR CAM, that is the Center for Applied Mathematics, in 2011. He served as a mentor of, in my days, it used to be called Women's Cell, and he mentioned that the name has been changed to Internal Complaints Committee. So he served on that, and I hope that he can bring perspectives both from the viewpoint of gender as well as his experience at the coal face in the sense of having served on the committee. And so with this, let me lead the panel. I mean, my role is as a moderator. So I'm just going to sort of gently suggest topics and leave it to the panelists to improvise or to say anything more, even if it doesn't directly touch on the topic. So let me start with Tanvi. And I would like to hear about the barriers faced by underrepresented minorities. What views you have on that, and how can we make matters better? And one request, of course, people are, there's a lot to be said and so on, but at the same time, while flagging issues, it would also be nice to have constructive suggestions which can probably go back and to the relevant people to see how to improve things and hopefully make the mathematical world and the community actively participate in making things better. Okay, over to you, Tanvi.
Thanks, Sujata. And hello, everyone. So basically, I would be now. This is the first time that I will be publicly talking about the gender issue as well as the underrepresented minority, in particular disability. But let's first talk of. I'll just give my brief. I'll keep the things brief and touch upon the problems. Some things that have been that are positive, they're looking positive, and my views that how they can be erected. So obviously we have a long way to go, but now when we are coming to women in science or mathematics in particular, so one thing from the very start that we hear in our society is that maths or science, these are not the fields for women. And that basically the problem starts at the very beginning of the whole thing. So in fact, and then we have now, there are certain things, government is taking steps in India that they are introducing reservations for women or but before we change our mindset that, so these reservations also can be used fruitfully only when our primary level training for girls is motivating, encouraging, and is good. So if the girls are motivated enough, then we just want to give them numbers and reservation and just make them enter any institute where they're not respected. So the society basically, this can be a short-term thing that we can provide reservations, but at every step of the career, starting from the school, to the undergrad, to graduate, and to the faculty. So many a times women face that mindset that this is probably an unconscious bias that as soon as we, for example, if we take, so now I'll just quote my personal experience. So I was a student at IIT Delhi in MSc, and I have a serious low eyesight problem. So basically that time, so it was in 2002, and that time there was a lot of ignorance that now lack of awareness is one of the things. But yeah, I used to basically just go to the teachers and say that, okay, I won't be able to read the question papers, and can you read them out for me in the during the exam? And everybody was very supportive. I think without a supportive society, without supportive institutes and supporting family, one cannot do anything. So, and no, I didn't have any problem with any of the faculty members there, but there was my classmate who basically, and I was the topper in both the semesters. So basically, one of the male students just came to me and said, so you're taking good use of making good use of the sympathy that you can basically get from these teachers. So probably he was pointing out to that I'm a probably woman, and he didn't know about the problem exactly. And so because of women, and something I'm saying to the teachers, that they have the sympathies with me, therefore I'm topping the exam. So that's something that's inherent bias, that if some woman and is being a topper, so without full information or knowledge, we just have a bias that there would be somebody would be favoring that woman, they're just without any reason, so unreasonably favoring. And that's something that we have in our society, I think, at every step. We have to get over this. No reservation, nothing can help if we don't get over this mindset. So now the other thing, that how can we do this? So just touching on the points, basically I'm a strong believer that if we start our training from the primary level, and that exactly this is strongly depicted in Mirza Khani's movie also. So if we start working at the primary level, that is the most important. So we should not inculcate in girls' minds as well as boys' minds that science is only for the male gender. So basically, that's the place we should work on. And I would like to see that there were no reservations. So everybody, now there is a disability reservation, but hardly it's used, because there's a 5% reservation. It was earlier 3% till 2016. Now it's a 5% reservation, but hardly it's used, because girls, at least so this 2001 census shows that only 37% of the basically students who are out of school are disabled women, disabled girls. So now, if they're not able to just complete their primary school, how can we expect them to use our reservation? And more than reservation, it's not the hindrance. In my case, it's not exactly the hindrance that I face because of the low eyesight, but it's basically because the hindrance that other people have. If you are going to judge someone, if a male and that's exactly not for just disabled, but for women in general, if there is a male collaborator and a female collaborator, generally the view will be that probably the male collaborator has worked more. And in case of a disabled woman, it's even stronger. So we have to come over. So I strongly believe we have to come over our unbiased those biases, and we have to start working from the primary level, both giving economic support, the financial support, so this psychological support and social support. So support at because where am I? It's basically because of the very supporting faculty, very supporting mentor, very supporting colleagues in our institute, in my institute. So, and without that, nobody can work. Not even a male, not even a female. So from
thank you,
this,
Tanvi. Yeah, thank you, Tanvi. So it's absolutely right. Vaidehi, you want to come in?
Yeah, so I also want to share my experience as a girl. I mean, I'm no longer a young girl, but I was at the time. In school, I saw my male classmates being constantly encouraged by my teacher, my maths teacher, who brought them to the front of the class, constantly praised them for solving some problems, and she actively ignored me. I didn't know why this was back then, because I was not aware of this kind of a bias. I continued my math Olympiad training. Eventually, I represented India in 2005 in the International Math Olympiad. And around that time, a lot of people, including some teachers who trained for Math Olympiad, would joke, haha, you just probably got in because of a girls' quota, right? And there is no girls' quota. I want to clarify that. I didn't take it seriously because I had proven myself I had nothing love to prove to these particular people. But this is an insult to my entire gender. So these people think that the only way a woman could get through a competitive series of tests is via some sort of reservation, or just because she's somehow exceptionally talented. That is like, not everyone is capable of getting through these tests. That is simply not true. Women are as capable as men or anybody else of achieving things. And this is something that is not ingrained into us as we are growing up. And the next point I want to make is that this kind of success encouraged me to get into mathematical research. However, I was not aware of what lies in front of me. There is no sustained support for early career female researchers. There are constant barriers coming up at every step. Something struck me when I was watching the film about Professor Mirzakhani. People commented on how she was so silent, so gentle about her troubles and how she didn't complain. This is amazing that she didn't complain. She has a very strong, she had a very strong personality. But this should not be used to stop women from bringing out issues, valid issues. It's like suffer in silence kind of a thing. Like silence comes at a price. If I don't speak out about some abuser, then I'm letting my younger colleagues suffer. And I'm not in a position to speak out because my career is at stake. So we want this cycle to break. And as Tanvi said, we have to start this training from an early age, not just girls, but also boys. We have to educate everybody that everyone, regardless of their gender, is capable of doing great things. And they should be treated as such. If we just bring in more numbers, if we just bring in more girls or more women, you're essentially planting a bunch of trees and leaving them without water outside to dry. That is something we don't want to happen. I would like to see more women come forward with their problems, their issues, without having the fear of prosecution or without having the fear of being perceived as weak or complaining.
Yeah, thank you, Vaidehi. So that so in my, I would like to make a comment here. I mean, some of these voices that I heard recently brought back memories also about the time when I served at the National Knowledge Commission, where we traveled across the country and especially interacted with teachers and not so much students, but we did interact with a wide range of teachers across geographies and so on. And talking of barriers, one thing that sort of again engraved in my memory, which I can never forget from that time, is a teacher saying how the barriers that one needed to break, just as gender is an issue, the caste. And he said, the distance we need to walk is enormous. And he gave an example. He said, when I park my cycle in front of the school, in a village school, and if one of the lower, where the caste issues are very strong in the village, and a student from a Dalit or a Harijan comes and touches a cycle, then there are other people in the school who, without even asking the teacher, washes the cycle. So he had to explicitly give instructions to say, you shouldn't do that. And he spoke about how difficult it was to implement. And Vaidehi is absolutely right about encouraging women students. Again, at that time, we looked through statistics, and the number of women teachers in high school and also in colleges in mathematics and broadly science far outnumbered the male teachers. And at that time, Intel had come up with this talent contest for high school students. And again, it was amazing the number of women students who made it to the top, who won the first prize, in comparison to the number of students who actually entered. There was a good cohort of male students and female students, and the female students made it to the top. Again, there was no quota, nothing. And one of the things we said was we should try and track these students. What happens to them when they do so well in these Intel contests? Why do you not see them in colleges or as researchers and so on? And we tried to institute a method of tracking, but it became very difficult. And from what limited data we had, we saw that again, it became a barrier, as Vaidehi said. many women, they were and in fact, there was no encouragement from within their own families. They said, oh no, what will you do doing this? Because it'll be difficult to get you married off. And this was particularly striking. And of course, we recommended some means. We said, okay, let's pay for the girl's education and then even promise the family a certain amount if the girl is allowed to complete her BSc or MSc, depending on the level that she completes, make it more and more attractive for her to stay in the education system and so on. But it never really got implemented. And the other point which was raised, which is very good, is peer recognition. And again, at that time, that was the first time that I think DST used to have some conferences where they invited women to talk about the issues that they faced and so on. This was, I'm talking about the 90s maybe. And one thing that was consistently brought out, this was from chemistry, was how, even when it was necessary and valid, women researchers were regularly not cited. And how this peer recognition is important, but this is a way that they are naturally excluded from peer recognition. And then again, mentors are mentioned over and over again, especially if they are male mentors, but women mentors are somehow brushed under the carpet. And this is something that should consciously be not done. For instance, even today, people don't know that Albert Einstein was mentored by Emmy Noether. And people don't even know Emmy Noether. They have heard of Albert Einstein. So how do we change this? I was fortunate enough to have a supportive family, but more importantly, a supportive cohort. My PhD group, the group of students I was doing the PhD with, there were 2 women and 3 to 4 male students, but we were such a closely knit group. And that really helps. So how do we foster such environments? And at this point, I would like Benky to come in and share his perspectives on this or on any other thing that he might have to talk about. I think you're muted, Benky. We can't hear you.
Yes. Thank you, Sujata. And so here I just want to touch upon what Tanvi and Vaidehi and you mentioned as well. So one thing is, I'm a big believer in building the ground up, from the ground up. So for instance, mentoring girls and underrepresented, not just girls, but underrepresented minorities, things like that. And I feel that, TIFR as an institution has a huge responsibility. So one thing, for instance, one thing that we could consider doing as an institute is, for instance, we do receive special benefits which are outside the salary. Like, for instance, there is something called the SPRIS, which is the performance related incentive scheme, something like that. And wherein we actually receive a certain amount of salary, a percentage of our basic pay as like an extra income. And we also receive something called this update allowance, which is actually a tax-free income every year. So one thing, for instance, that we could consider, right? And this is something left to, the people managing the institute, that we could tie these to the performance of people in actually, mentoring underrepresented minorities, girls, people, first generation learners who are not learning in the English language, anybody who wants to learn, the thing is, so we could actually consider doing this. And that way, the thing is, there is also a societal responsibility to us as faculty members, that, we also need to give back to the society. Of course, we are already giving back to the society in terms of mentoring research students, things like that. But, the thing is, this would actually be in my opinion, a big step. For instance, one thing that TIFR again could do is, so for instance, IASC does this, where they have like a week program where they call in college kids and I think high school kids. And then, you have this series of lectures by eminent scientists, and that, that could actually create spark in people to actually pursue and, show that, even I can do math or I can do science, whatever it is, right? And the other thing that I want to emphasize is that, you see, the thing is, at least, I'm just talking from the perspective of CAM. And I have sat on various, interview committees and things like that. And honestly, the thing is, when we interview people, the gender or, even the language plays absolutely no role, right? And, the thing is, even when we take a decision, it just plays absolutely no role. And, there could be, unconscious bias, but by definition, I would not be able to know that, right? That's possible. But what I'm saying is that when we look at people, when we look at applications, we don't, the gender or the caste or whatever it is, no role, right? But the problem that I see is that the numbers, for instance, we represent 50%, that is, we as in males represent 50% of the population, women represent 50% of the population. But when it actually comes to people coming to interviews, things like that, we don't actually see that numbers to actually, have almost an equal representation of girls and boys, right? And this is where I feel that building from the ground up plays a big role. And the other thing that I want to emphasize is the following, that I heard this, I'm not so sure about this, but the government of India is actually is already initiated probably that for research grants, there is a societal, it's like this corporate social responsibility, wherein companies have to have like a percentage of their profits or whatever towards social responsibility. So I heard that government is also initiating this something called the social responsibility. And so as far as grants is concerned, then the thing is, faculty members also can give back to the society in terms of fulfilling that particular social responsibility part of their research grants. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Benky. This is a welcome point of view. I remember in TIFR at that time, and I think this is one of the reasons that our, if you look at the quality of institutions in India, the gradient is not smooth. It's so sharp. There are the ones which are at the top, which are very thin. And then there's a deep slide and there's a valley, rather than a more continuous distribution. And I think this comes because of lack of reaching out or lack of integrating colleges and schools. In TIFR, I remember very clearly in my days, when you did any kind of outreach or when you went and gave a talk in a college, it was even viewed as something negative. You were doing it because you were not devoting time to research, or because your research was not going as well as it should. And these kind of very strong dominating views don't make it an effective functioning working place. And let's talk a little about role models and mentors. That was another thing. During my years at TIFR, I know of so many women who were selected but who couldn't come because of family reasons. They said, no, my daughter cannot stay in a hostel where there are men and women staying in the same building. And there were cases of married women who couldn't come because who joined but then had to drop off because the timings were not convenient. They were commuting from long distances and so on. And there was not even a thought about, should we address this? In my own case, I can say very honestly that if anything at all, the view was, let's not do anything which will be perceived as sort of giving more accommodation to her because she is married and because she has a child, rather than seeing how to create an enabling work atmosphere. The only exception was my own group. I was lucky enough to have a woman PhD advisor, but more than the woman PhD advisor Parimila, it was the whole group, in particular Professor Sridharan. As women, I don't think we need patronizing. We need an enabling work atmosphere. And to this day, I cannot remember the warmth that Sridharan brought into that group. And he very frankly would tell me, he said, look, I understand that you're coming from far, and he was giving lectures, and please understand that I will never cancel a lecture, even if you cannot come for valid reasons, like your child is not well or your mother-in-law is not well. But don't ever hesitate to come and tell me that you want to hear the lecture, and I'll lecture to you separately, even if you're a singleton audience. These words carry so much weight and create an enabling atmosphere. And constantly he used to push the fact that women are capable of doing more, and the only reason that they are not able to do more is because of not creating the right circumstances. So we need mentors and an enabling work atmosphere like that. And talking of role models, let's move a little to talk about role models and mentors. So this was one thing that I noticed in Germany, where I used to go very often from my years as a PhD student, where there were very few women, to today, to have taken corrective action. And one of the corrective actions they took was to create a whole pipeline of role models, not just young graduate students, try to bring in more professors, though I won't say they have fully succeeded in that, but also in repairing the whole pipeline by way of grants. How do we administer grants that will enable more women to come in? And also signaling to having women in every committee, in every funding opportunity, and right up to the top, to a woman science minister. So, and many of the younger women, they tell me that this really improved some of the work opportunities and so on. So can we talk a little about the steps to be taken at the level of mentors, role models, or pipeline from the top to the bottom? Tanvi. You're muted.
Sorry. So in my, so basically in my opinion, exactly for me, again, as a student at every level, it's basically, as you said, it's basically the professors, the faculty, the teachers. So in the school, there's a teacher who will basically, so I had a woman math teacher, and it never came in my mind probably at that time that it's not, so mathematics is something not for women, because I had women math teachers almost throughout my school life. And then at the college level, luckily Delhi University had a lot of female faculty. And then at the, so it starts from the, so when you're not aware of, so then slowly you start seeing the world, that Mirza Khani or Romani or Sujata. So those become, but at the first level, we see our teachers. And when they are happy, then they are they look to be content and doing good, and not really basically depressed with their profession. That gives a very positive impact on the students. So that's something that I think is very much required at every step, and not even just the female mentors that play a very important role, but the male mentors that actually, as you said, like Professor Sridharan. So I have this now Professor Bhatia is my mentor, and I'll just tell you that basically I was not a student of ISI, but used to just attend courses as a PhD student in IIT. And he knew that I had the problem. I had told him, and he just gave me nothing, but he knew that I couldn't copy notes. I couldn't do so. There in IIT, I had a lot of friends, a very supportive group. But here I was alone, not a student here. So he gave me notes with big font. So he used to have a special photocopy. They had me given me big font notes. So those also. So now, and every time if I'll see, he is my role model. So now if I'm at this position, so I'll also try to do something that I have seen in my mentors and in my role models. I'll try to think that what he or she, whom I regard, would have done in this situation. So that's very important for making me do a right thing, as well as motivating me. So at the time of depression, so what the other role model would have done for in this situation. So that's very important. Thank you.
I can share a bit if you want. So growing up, I didn't have many female mentors, so to say. And the ones I knew, they were sort of treated like celebrities. Okay, this is an extremely talented person. It's almost a miracle, that kind of stuff. But the people I actually looked up to were like during my Olympiad training, were girls who were maybe 2 or 3 years older than me, and they were already competing in IMO. And I thought, okay, if they can do it, they just look like me, they study like me, they go to schools that I'm familiar with. Maybe I can also do this. And this sort of pattern has continued throughout my life. There is somebody who is like just a stage ahead of me. Right now, I'm a postdoc, so maybe I look up to some assistant professors. Okay, if they can do this, probably I can too. So that's one helpful part. We don't need to put women on pedestals. We just need to see ordinary women doing extraordinary work. That's my definition of a female role model. And the second aspect is that role models don't have to be all women. They don't even have to be older than you. One instance I'll give you is that, as I said, people often joked about I got through this Olympiad because of a girls' quota, etc. Some were joking, and some went on an online campaign to essentially harass me. They put stuff online saying, "Oh, she got through this reservation. She's still getting special treatment." It was all over the internet, and my family was quite bothered by that. I wasn't. What I saw, and that made me extremely happy, was that some of my classmates, some of the juniors at my institute, they went online to defend me. They explained to this person that no, there is no such thing as reservation. She's proven herself. These are also my role models, the men who stand up when they see injustice happening elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Vaidehi. And, I think that those kind of, I won't even call it understanding, but standing up to reality by your cohorts, that's very important. And that's a mindset we have to bring about, a change in the mindset from schools, just like encouraging more girls, making them believe in themselves and making them feel that they are capable. We should at the same time see how to change the mindset of people around them, their families, their parents, and their own classmates. Benky, as a member of the grievance cell, can you bring in some perspectives related to the kind of issues we should be addressing?
See, one thing, as CAM, first of all, we are a very small institute, and our numbers are already small. But having said that, I served for several years on this Women's Cell / Internal Complaints Committee, and whenever complaints were brought to us, we actually dealt it the way it, in my opinion and in the opinion of the committee, the way it should be. And the justice was dealt with, and the wrong party was called out and punished. So these are all things that these are the bare minimum that an internal complaints committee should do. So one thing that at least this is my personal experience, is that we have recruited female candidates in our integrated PhD program. And one of the things that students say is that, first of all, they are very uncomfortable with this mixed hostel, right, wherein both girls and boys they share, it's not like a separated thing. And so the thing, I don't believe that they should live separately and things like that. They should be comfortable with each other. And but this has been one of the barriers for us in actually having, even when we offer integrated PhD positions to these to some of the girl students, this is cited as one of the reasons. And we have been grappling with as to how how to make them comfortable. So for instance, one of the things that we do is have another female student talk to them and convince them, things like that. the other thing is about, you asked about these role models, right? So the thing is, having a role model, and whether it's male or female, is very important. And one of the ways that I see is, having us, contribute more in the form of outreach activities, outreach lectures, and this is not to, city bred people, okay, not just limited to city bred people or city bred students, but going to remote parts of the country where, first generation learners, and us as faculty members stepping up to the plate and offering more to the society. Thank you.
Thanks, Benky. He spoke about career support. What kind
I
of
think
early
Uma
career
has her
support?
hand up. Maybe she has a question.
Sorry, yeah, Uma, yeah.
Hi. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to jump in. But I was just thinking that one of the things we saw in the film, and also I'm Uma from NCBS, by the way. Hi, everyone. We saw in the film, and we also heard from all of you, is about, the importance of, primary school education, all of these things, and mentoring and enabling environments for younger people. I'm just curious about, since I'm not in that bracket anymore, maybe this comes to my mind. What about senior career or researchers? Because I think that a lot of times, keeping on going and going from strength to strength in terms of creativity, also asking bold and new questions, also requires a lot of support, going forward. So I'm just curious about any of your opinions, because it seemed like from the film, Mirza Khani just effortlessly kept going. And I was just wondering, how does that, maybe it was effortless, but we kind of get this feeling that, getting to the faculty position is the very, very tough part. And of course it is, but continuing to, do well, ask questions, keep on having the ease of working is also, I think, a little challenging. So any thoughts on that would be really good. Thanks.
Yeah, I think of course, think times have changed now, especially post-pandemic. I'm sure if we had this meeting a year from now, there will be other voices and other perspectives. But what I can say is, the subjects are, at least in mathematics, things are moving so fast, and I'm sure it's the same in the other areas, that you cannot afford to take your eyes off the wheel, in some sense. But that also creates undue pressure in some sense. And especially now that I'm in an institution where there's also teaching, and given the health issues that I faced in the recent past, I'm thankful that, there isn't this constant pressure to prove all the time, right? Because like you say, creativity can flow continuously all the time, or there are times when you should feel productive in other areas. And that can be cushioned by mentoring, where you feel valued when you mentor, when you teach, and so on, or when you do the things in the larger societal outreach. But I don't have specific answers. It's not like a tap that you can turn on and off whenever you want to. And I think people understand that. And people who are lucky enough to be sort of continuously prolific or productive should also recognize this. And one way to encourage this would be more interaction, because I am a great believer in the fact, what I believe is that science is not those days when you closeted yourself. There can be one Andrew Wiles, one Ramanujan, and so on, who closet themselves and come out with great theorems. But it is a collective effort. And a lot of activity, at least for me, it happens when you talk to people, when you go to conferences, or when you arrange workshops and so on. So that's my feeling. And maybe women or all groups should have more venues for organizing events, if that is helpful. That's my 2 cents worth. But I would be interested in others if they have anything to say about this. No?
A couple of
So
things
I
come
can
to
just
mind. Sorry, go ahead, Tanvi.
so basically just then now what I feel is that basically yes, uh, continued productivity, that also depends on a way the conclusion, the atmosphere that you're in. So there is a huge amount of pressure, but the atmosphere around you make it feel more or less. So the feeling that you get from the atmosphere that you are in, that plays a very important role. So in a stressful environment, you cannot really work. You cannot prove anything. You cannot have good ideas. So the atmosphere plays a very important role, both at the institution in where you are working, as well as the family where you are in.
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't think we have a
What I
full
was,
answer. Yeah.
so
Can I
what I
say
would
something?
say is this.
Yeah, go ahead, Vaidehi. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was about to say, so I'm a postdoc, and so this is early career, and what helps me be productive is, well, one, acknowledge the outreach and teaching and mentoring I'm doing as being productive. Research is not the only aspect of my work. And I particularly went through a really bad, stressful period during the pandemic because I felt useless as a pure mathematician, to be honest. And I wasn't making real life differences when everybody was suffering. So I threw myself in organizing outreach events, mentoring students who came to me, or just like talking to them one on one if they were going through something. So I put in my time, I put in my energy, physical and mental energy. And I didn't get the support required at that time from senior people or the department when I was going through health issues, and I asked for a little bit of help. So I would like to be acknowledged for the work I'm doing so that I can feel energized and continue with my research. So I would say redefine productivity itself. And the second thing is having somebody reviewing basically like your CV or like whatever your work so far and telling you that you are doing enough. So this happened to me recently and it helped me a lot. I'm with a new postdoctoral mentor here in the UK. She went through my CV and she said that, okay, you have taught enough courses, you have done enough mentoring. Now just take some time to do your research. You don't have to take on any more of this. And I just felt like somebody gave me the permission to be like to produce research, and that itself is a weight of my mind. I have more peace of mind, so that might help, just somebody giving you the permission.
Yeah. So talking about mental health, that's one area where, especially post-pandemic, I think institutes should be better geared towards that, to have some kind of a talking place or a supportive structure in place. I know it's very difficult, especially given a place like India where even the concept of mental health itself, you can have a whole year of panel discussions on that, what it means and how it's viewed and so on. And to layer it on top of a career, a scientific career, or to bring it in as part of your workplace, scientific workplace, it needs to be done. And I feel that the pandemic brings in a little urgency to this. So I'm wondering if people have thought about this. Okay, so I think if I can now maybe
There is one, yeah, Rukmini has raised her hand.
Rukmini Day has raised her hand.
Yeah, Rukmini.
Yeah, it is a big problem during pandemic years, especially among the students. So many students have left academia because they didn't have the peer group support. They were studying from home, and it's really sad. And the counseling team in ICTS, for instance, tried its best, but still there were a lot of. So we really urgently need to address this issue, I think.
Yeah. So Sandhya, it's going to
can I
be
add
an hour.
something? Sorry. I'm
Sure.
sorry. Yeah, I think that it's also it's not just about the pandemic, but I think that there's a lot of issues which are causing anxiety to a lot of young people. Even environmental anxiety is a big thing these days. Younger people fear a lot about, how the changing climate and other imminent environmental catastrophes are going to affect our lives, because they really are going to affect their lives. Whereas, we never, as younger people, we probably didn't think about these things so much. So I think that there's a lot of other kinds of existential crises which seem to be on the horizon, and the pandemic really pushed, it almost made those seem real. Like before that, you could probably tell yourself, oh, these are just probably, I'm imagining or thinking about these things, but something did happen like that. So I think that just as Vaidehi said, she said, as a mathematician, I felt I wasn't able to do something important during the pandemic. I think that that's something which brings back focus to reassessing productivity. And I think it's critically important in academia, because academia is about creativity, about individuals, that individuals are made up of different parts, and recognizing that there may be times in an individual's life where they may want to do something like this or that or the other might be critically important. But I think all of that kind of goes in the face of the professionalization of science, which requires specific milestones to be met at specific points in time. So there may be some contradictions there, and that's something which I guess we would have to really but I mean, I know while we're saying that mental health is a very new thing, I don't know, is that really true? I mean, I think that maybe its discussion is new, and its mainstream discussion is new, but maybe it's not such a new thing.
No, but again, it's not new, and for a long time it was detrimental to sort of sweep it under the carpet and try to bury it.
Right? Sujata, can I step in over here? Yes. I think I'm Sandhya Kaushika from the Mumbai campus, for those of you who don't know. I think both Vaidehi and Uma raised very valid points, and what you yourself said, it's swept under the carpet. I would say that in all of the things that we as institutions and individuals do, rightly a lot of attention is focused at the entry level of the profession. So what you mentioned about mental health issues and the pandemic, that is certainly not restricted only to students. It's easier for our communities to focus on that. And it also is important because that is the pipeline through which you continue to populate the profession. But as Uma said, I think it's very important to recognize that the people who have made it into the profession, especially if they are from underrepresented groups, need continued support. And I think as institutions world over, there is still, as Uma rightly pointed out, this professionalization of science, and the way we have made everything based on a metric does not give sufficient room to have different kinds of ways to execute the profession, or necessarily the support that's needed if people are not quite going at the pace at which somebody else expects them to. So, and this has tremendous impact on mental health, which is often not recognized. And a mathematician may not have very large groups, but this is also relevant for groups which run experimental, where if the PI is not in a good space, it can have a detrimental effect on the whole group. And somehow we expect women to be super moms and PIs to be super whatever, and wear all the hats and be very successful. And I think as institutions, we need to carefully look at this aspect with some care while we stay committed to whatever our definition of excellence is.
Yeah, Yeah, very valid point, Sandhya. So we need to recalibrate. Yeah, need to recalibrate this. Yeah, go ahead, Vaidehi.
I was going to say that one thing that wouldn't ideally require too many resources and that could be implemented is somewhat regular check-ins by the university or the head of the department. And I'll just give you a short instance of this. Particularly last fall, I was handling a huge class of students teaching online, 200 students. And obviously, a lot of them were going through COVID-related issues like death in the family, students themselves being sick, and so on. And uh, as we've already seen, like female instructors are often viewed as super moms. So they would want to share with me. They needed somebody to talk to. So I scheduled all these back-to-back meetings with them. And essentially, I was holding informal counseling sessions, like trying to listen to their stories, etc. And I didn't realize it, but slowly and over time, it took a lot out of me, and I was under immense amount of stress. And I reached a stage where I couldn't handle that anymore. And after some point, I finally reached out to my chair saying that, this is not going that great, and, some help would be appreciated. And then he asked me, why didn't you come forward sooner? That's a really great question, because I didn't want to be perceived as weak. I didn't want to be the one complaining, or, I didn't want somebody to say, oh, why are you chatting with these people? That's not your job. Like one of the many reasons. So I explained this to him, and then he said, okay, this is my phone number. You shouldn't feel shy about contacting me if you're having any sort of trouble. Just call me anytime if you're feeling overwhelmed. I didn't call him that much, but just saying that, okay, if you're not doing well, give me a call is helpful. And at the systemic level, if there can be 3-month check-ins or monthly check-ins, just to say, okay, are you doing okay? Do you need any kind of support? And if they make you sit down and fill out that form, that might be helpful instead of sending out emails from the university that say, oh, I hope you had a good semester. I hope you had a chance to refresh, reboot, rejuvenate, whatever. Those emails do nothing but harm. But a mandatory check-in that is taken seriously would actually be helpful. It's almost like writing things down in a journal, like, okay, how am I feeling today? Like a check-in for yourself, for your team, done by the superiors.
Yeah, that's a valid point. And small gestures and wordings like this, it just, I mean, they might not concretely involve anything, but just saying, oh, why didn't you tell me earlier, immediately lifts a whole weight off your shoulders. And often, especially when you're as a supervisor, I always went through terrible guilt feelings when my students weren't doing well. Was it my fault? So how do we remove these and especially when the expectations are very high, you feel responsible even if your student is not doing well in a high stress environment. And then for me, it was very helpful to say, look, I have a role, and that's only limited to a certain amount, and I can only do certain things, and all I can do is tell the student, look, it doesn't matter if you're not doing well. There are other things you can do as a person. So don't feel worthless just because you can't do this, So institutional check-ins are a good idea. Yeah, Benky, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that I heard from my dean is that so you mentioned about if you were to go to a local college and actually give a lecture, it could be viewed negatively. So I think things are changing, and this is what I heard from my dean, that the TFR management and all managements in general are viewing not just research but mentorship, teaching, and committee responsibilities. All those things are on the table when they actually decide on promotions or any of those things. So that's actually a change in the right direction from what you mentioned from your time in TIFR.
Yeah, that's good. I'm very glad to hear that. Talking about gestures again, because all this triggers so many memories of my long commute back from TIFR to Andheri, where I was living, and so on. I remember, of course, there were the crowded trains where there was just no hope of getting a place to sit and so on. But then that last stretch from Andheri station to Warsaw, when I took a bus, and there would often be male members who would stand up and give up their seat. And then I remember this particular instance where the person sitting next to that person who said, no, you're not sitting on the lady's seat. You don't need to get up to give the seat. But he said, I understand. My wife comes from work every day and I know she has to come back home and take care of the child and cook. So I know that this is going to help, and I'm not doing this just because I'm mistakenly sitting on a lady's seat. That gesture sort of rejuvenated, made me feel fresh enough when I went back home to begin the evening again, So things like that. It's like Vaidehi's point about just sending a message or saying, why didn't you tell me earlier? That these are intangible, but somehow a support structure which can be meaningful. So I think, Sandhya, we've sort of exceeded an hour. I'll stop here. Maybe if there are questions or contributions from the participants, we can discuss that. Is that okay, Sandhya?
Yes, of course. We sort of had allotted about an hour. If anybody has questions, Vandana has a question.
Yeah, I have more of a comment, not the question. So I just wanted to say that the working group 5, which is the for women in physics working group of IUPAP, had one of the features which they had was, what they call a program involving men as allies and promoting best practices. So I think this best practice training is essentially how to overcome the biases. And this is something which is a must. All the institutions should kind of get into doing this at mandatory, both for the students, faculty and all. And that's one of the things which will help us to create awareness, because many people don't know that they actually do this out of bias or whatever. Everybody says there is no bias or I am not biased. That's a very standard statement you will hear. So I think this best practice training or orientation or whatever you want to call is that kind of a thing putting across is something which is very good. And just a small comment on one of the point which Sujata made, that as a part of NKC, she had seen that a lot of college teachers and school teachers were women in science. So when I was growing up, one of the things which I heard as an option for the career is this teacher option is very good for the women, because you get holidays for all the festivals and long summer breaks. So it's a very good, that's how, at least I'm saying this because that's how it is perceived in the society as an option which lets you balance your career without, follow your career without having too much of disturbance in the family.
Yeah. So that I'll just close by saying, there's this book, Leelavati's Daughters. I hope people are aware of it. It was brought out by the Indian Academy of Sciences in the 90s, and they have another edition now where women scientists from across the fields in India wrote essays on how they got to be where they are and so on. And for me, the most insightful thing about meeting people who had read that book was, I didn't know that women could be as passionate about research as men. And this used to come from across, from families who had nothing to do with science to people inside science. So a lot of work to be done. I think we have touched upon some of the points. Of course, we can go on and on, but there can be some key takeaways, I think, in terms of people's voices. And I think I'm ready to stop, but yeah, Shivaguru, there's a question.
Shivaguru has raised his hand.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Shivaguru from CAM. Lot of, as Sujata was saying, there's a lot to unpack and sort of take home and mull over, but I want to address a very, very specific point. This was brought out by Vaidehi. The fact that, having spaces where you can flag issues or raise complaints without repercussions, right? So when I moved back to India, it was a huge shock that the math community in India is terribly small and unfortunately very gossipy, to the point that I have known several instances where people knew of outcome of committee meetings through somebody else than the committee telling them. Like, like if you apply for a job, right, somebody else would know that you've got a job before you do. Somebody was not on the committee, right? So given this environment, what do we do?
Yeah, again, this brings us back to training. I think the kind of sensitization that one needs, and also I would even advocate a kind of reverse repercussion, when confidential matters like this leak out, then the person, whoever knows or how it has been leaked, there should be a way to flag this. Right? This has leaked. I don't know who's responsible. Go find out, but this cannot be done in the future. And you're right, it's absolutely gossipy, and it comes part of it's again, my take on it, especially having come to different places, is because there are few things to do apart from research. So the constant thing you can comment about is somebody's research or somebody else's personality. Whereas if you're teaching, or if you were introduced, if you believed in other things like societal outreach and so on, then this is just one part of the picture. But I completely agree with you, Shivaguru, and especially coming from an outside environment, this can be a bit of a shock. The language used to everything, And of course, the excuse will be given, I don't want to walk over eggshells. I'm very frank. I want to say what I think.
I would say that I mean, I have brought up these kinds of issues before, like in front of some Indian mathematicians, they took it very personally as if I was attacking India. So let me make it clear. This is not just an Indian issue. This is also an issue in the US, Canada, UK, everywhere. Just the level and the type is probably a little different. We still don't have safe enough spaces to share our experiences, go to HR without the fear of repercussion. Because let's say you file a complaint with HR about whatever issue you're having, they resolve it and appropriately punish the relevant party. You still get stamped as a troublemaker. So it's still very career damaging, especially if you're not established. And I'm speaking here as a panelist, and I really have to choose my words carefully and the experiences I share with you carefully, because I don't yet have a permanent position. And that's saying something. Like, I've been invited as a panelist. I should be able to speak without as such as walking on eggshells, but I am not. So that still says something about the kind of spaces we have, or rather we don't.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, in no way is it restricted to India, but I think I still want to pay attention to what Shivaguru says in terms of numbers. It is a very small community and everything gets amplified.
We have two raised hands, Nishant and Geetansh. Maybe Nishant can go first.
Hi. So thanks a lot for the discussion. It was eye-opening in many different ways. There's something which I think, I don't remember exactly who said this, but it reminded me of something about there should be space to experiment or to do other things, except just focusing say on your research career and being productive. And this is something which I felt very sorely as a postdoc. And and I'm sure that the others who also felt this. And the reason why I felt this was because, if I had to come back to India, there was this age limit of 35 that I had to apply by. And this was always constantly hovering on my head. Okay, I'm not going to try something very difficult because, I'm going to focus on trying to get my job around that time. And it could be, it's not just about trying a different problem. You might want to have a family, which causes a career break. And I'm not sure when an application will be considered later. They will consider the factor that, this person had a child and or took a break. So having these age constraints are, I think, very, very detrimental. And now, having served on some committees, evaluating postdoctoral students, age was a big factor. People did take it very seriously. Oh, this person is 36 years old. Should we be considering this candidate? So I just wanted to raise this issue because there are several people here, especially people who are in other fields like biology. It takes some time to pursue and understand what they want to pursue. And I hope that there are people who would take this seriously.
Yeah, thanks, Nishant, for that input. Yes. And I think part of this also comes from the larger belief, entrenched belief that your best work is done from when you're at this age or that age, it almost becomes urban myths, you know. There's one more hand raise. Yeah, Geetansh.
Yeah, thank you for this discussion. I'm a MSc student at TIFR. I just wanted to raise a point regarding the talk we were having regarding mentoring. I just want to say that as a mentor, it is very easy to motivate an already good student. But the focus should be on the students that are mediocre, rather than those are already like very good at their subjects. You can easily motivate them. That's not like a very hard thing to do. But the students that are not actually very good at subject, but need some mentoring, need motivation, those students are not getting it at all. The only good students are being focused on. The rest are just like outsiders. They think that they don't belong here, they shouldn't be here. Like for students like that, it's very hard to like pursue a MSc and go to a PhD. So I just wanted to make this point that the students that are mediocre should not be like left behind. They should also be motivated and like helped with their subjects, because you never know who can do a good research.
Sure.
It's like they just need some motivation.
Yeah. And this is related to this other point, I think, that I made about the steep gradient between very good institutions and then you have the steep valley down in India, you know. So finding a place to fit, it's somehow, unless you have a more smoother range of institutions and workplaces, you know, it's difficult. But I completely agree with what you're saying. And I always say that when people praise the IITs or the top institutes, I say the only thing I can say about the IIT is that you're not destroyed. When your input, you consider it a great achievement, you know, input, your throughput, you enter and then you come out unharmed. Whereas most of our institutions do more harm, right? Most of our educational institutions. So how do we offset that? That's a good point. You know, given a diverse set of student population and other constraints in India, we need to think about this wholesomely.
So can I step in, Sujata? I think language matters. And I think especially with trainees, you have to be very careful about using words like mediocre. I think nobody knows what someone is capable of. You know, the environment may not be right, their mind may not be ready, they may have other issues that they're grappling with. You never know 5 years down the road. I know that this age-related thing is almost part of mythology in mathematics, but you never really know if someone is going to flower at a later time and do exceptionally well. And there are examples of that even in mathematics, where people have done really well later on. And I think as mentors and as communities, we must really try to be sensitive about the language we use to describe our trainees. I think that's very important that we all try to be careful about.
Just a word here. Sorry, you can
go ahead, Tanvi.
Yeah. So basically, as you pointed out, so now as a mentor, as a teacher, I think my happiest moments are when somebody who wouldn't have been doing good basically improves. There is a considerable difference when when he started the course in my course in the semester, and when he or she ended. And then, so I have instances that students then get to very good universities, then they really write. So the way they regard you, that is, I think, the happiest moments. So somebody who's already good does very well, that's okay, that you feel anyways happy. But there are instances that people actually do good. And I have certain students who basically fall in that category. And those are the happiest moments for a mentor also. So yeah. I think that's very, very important. Even for a very elite institute, as well as a average university or institute, for all places.
Yeah, thanks, Tanvi.
Something I've seen in at least the mathematical community is that if you're not perceived as successful, then you honestly don't matter as a human being. I'm putting it harshly because that is what happens. And what instructors or mentors need to realize is that everybody comes from different backgrounds, and they might actually have potential. Something that happened to me when I was at ISI in my first year, I was having some severe family problems that the teachers didn't know about. But my probability teacher once called me to his office, and he said that I see that you're consistently underperforming on your homework assignments and exams. I think you have the potential to do much better. If you are having some problems, please come talk to me. I didn't talk to him, but knowing that he saw through why I was failing or why I was not doing as well, knowing that just helped me a lot. And I try to do that with my students. I see that it's helping actually. If you just have a one-on-one with them, just for a minute, saying that, I know you are capable of more. What do you need from me? What help do you need from me? How can we make this better for you so that you can continue working hard and achieve your true potential?
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've passed the mic around the participants, but if there's anything else, anybody else wants to add, I can keep it open. Otherwise,
just one quick thing, that maybe we should meet oftener than just once a year for Women's Day, just to discuss this.
Yeah. Right. I think, even these PAN TIFR meetings, or even within places, cities in India like Bangalore and so on, where there are other institutions, to have inter-institutional meetings to share experiences and to sort of create a wider community. You can encourage the students to do the same. And technology and the pandemic has somehow made this more, I won't say acceptable, but let's say slightly more normal than what it was before. So, yeah. So thanks.
Sujata, 1 second. Rajalakshmi had raised her hand.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Rajalakshmi.
Sorry, I think it was mentioned many times. I tried to say it. One thing I think, having meetings and all that is good. I think it was in various ways you're saying it, but what is important is to get recognition for even small things that people do, which motivates people to stay on. Correct. Often when that recognition is not there, is when people feel that they have not accomplished anything, and then there's tendency to drop off or get even less efficient and
exactly.
It becomes things. So
becomes
the mechanism of giving this recognition right now, the scales are only at one level. So the scales have to be, the recognition doesn't have to always be at that scale. It can be at various scales and in various ways. So yeah, that has to be done. If even small things are recognized in a small way, not in a big way, I think it'll encourage people, just as you were saying, that just a small statement made somewhere encourages people. So similarly, recognition for small acts also will probably encourage people to stay on.
Yeah.
Sujata and everybody else, I can see raised hands, but I think at this point of time, we should wrap up the formal proceedings and maybe stop streaming on YouTube. And people can continue to hang out on the Zoom link and chat with each other if they so choose. Let me see if I can stop the streaming.
I'll do that.